This is 80s TV Ladies, where we explore the fabulous female-driven television shows of the 1980s with your hosts, Susan Lambert-Haddam and Sharon Johnson.
Hello, I'm Sharon.
And I'm Susan.
For the last few weeks, we've really been enjoying looking back at Moonlighting. I remembered it fondly. Honestly, didn't remember a lot of the specifics. So it has been really educational looking back on it. There's a lot of the show that I really admire. And the more I've learned about some of the challenges that the production faced, it makes my admiration level go up. I admire the performances. But, you know, it's a hit or miss. A lot of the episodes held up really well. Some of them not so much because of a lot of it having to do with things outside of the control of the show. So, but overall, this has really been wonderful to look back.
I agree, Sharon. You know, I was skeptical starting the rewatch, a little worried that it might age poorly because it was so of its time. I really loved it. Remember loving it. But I think it is absolutely worth watching again. It's odder and more interesting than I remember. It's occasionally uneven. Like there are some episodes that are not as good as others.
Which is true of any show.
Which is true of any show, particularly from the 80s.
Yes.
We always see a little bit of a drop in those later seasons. But I appreciate it more than I thought I would. I appreciate the humor of it. I appreciate the fourth wall breaking. I appreciate the experimentation in almost every episode, trying something that just hadn't been done in 80s television.
Or since the audacity of it, the willingness of Glenn Gordon Caron to just say, we're going to try all kinds of stuff and do it. And the fact that the network said, okay, it boggles the mind on some level. It really does.
And as we are talking to people and realizing that is challenging as the show was behind the scenes, it also was people having a lot of fun because I think they knew they were working on something very unique. And certainly it seems like most people were enjoying it even amongst the stress of it. Mm-hmm. And hopefully I think are able to appreciate it now that there's just been some time because you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Because that's how you remember things. Yeah, it's fine. I'm here. But yeah.
But nevertheless, it's good to get another perspective, especially from our 90s TV babies who always bring lots of surprises and insights that we just really appreciate. So
indeed, it is time to bring in the 90s TV babies, our awesome friends who were all born in the 90s, various times throughout the 90s, to watch these shows for the first time and tell us what they think.
Serita Fontanesi, who is a podcaster, content creator, and training facilitator in diverse progressive sectors and electoral politics. She lives in Austin, Texas.
And Sergio Perez is an actor, director, and playwright who lives in Los Angeles. He also works with me at 80s TV Ladies and our producing company, 134 West. So while he's the youngest of our 90s TV babies, he also has a little bit of insider info because he hears about these shows long before we give him assignments.
And last but not least, Megan Ruble is an actress, singer, and amazing person who lives locally here in the San Fernando Valley.
It's important to note that part of the reason, Sharon, we bring on the 90s TV babies is to get a different perspective. We are looking at these shows often because we loved them, I think, and because but we also looking at them through the lens of nostalgia. You know, we saw them when we were young. We saw them when we were growing up. We saw them when we were formulating ideas of the world. We saw them in the 80s, 40 years ago. And so I sort of think it's important to have a different perspective.
Absolutely. And because we bring an understanding of the context of what the 70s, 80s, 90s, et cetera, bring to our viewing of these shows in a different way than it is for someone like our 90s TV babies that didn't experience it.
Because they're babies.
That's right.
I think it's vital to have these different perspectives. We didn't have access to that kind of communication when we were growing up. We didn't, the world changes and is supposed to change. So I don't know. I wanted to like sort of point out why I love bringing them on and love hearing from them, even if sometimes they put a little pin in the balloon of things for me, because sometimes I'm so expecting them. I'm like, they're going to love this one. And then they don't.
I've gotten it wrong every time when I've just thought, they're going to feel this way about it. And they're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. And that's okay. That has been something that I have gotten out of this segment, gotten out of these episodes that I was not expecting. It's been so great to hear what they have to say, to listen to their thoughts about it. And it helps in some ways for me to put things in a context I hadn't thought about before. It hasn't changed my thoughts, I have to say, about what I have felt about these shows before I talk to them. But it's always good to get somebody else's perspective, because we don't all think about things the same way.
And that diversity is our strength. I have kids, and you often want to show them something and be like, don't you want to love this as much as I loved it? and they don't always. Sometimes they do. And I kind of learned something too. You sort of get a perspective on the 80s that I don't get when I'm just thinking about it. Anyway, let's get to it.
Absolutely.
They're going to surprise me.
Let's go. Please welcome back to 80s TV Ladies, the absolutely fabulous 90s TV babies, Serita Fontanesi, Sergio Perez, and Megan Ruble. Welcome back, guys.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks for having us back.
It has been a while. How is everyone? How is 2024 treating you?
Amazingly. So much happening at the same time, though. I would like 2024 to calm down. How are you doing, though, Sergio?
2024 is crazy. I cannot believe that it is already March. That I feel like I was just in the Philippines counting down to January 1st. But now I'm here in my home in March, which is wild.
It's moving quickly, very, very quickly. And you over the holidays, you were in the Philippines.
Yes, I was. I went for a family reunion. It was so much fun. I had a great time. I think this is the first time I've been where I was like, maybe I could live here, maybe.
Ooh.
I'm not going to make any decisions right now.
Good to have options, though.
Oh, actually, I have it right here. For those of you who are listening, my mom gave me this book of heirloom recipes from the province that she is from in the Philippines. So it's like Kapampangan recipes. And the really cool thing about it is that we learned, because there is a family tree in here, that we are very distantly related to the woman who wrote this.
Well,
wow.
Yeah. What?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
That is so cool. Did you get it in the Philippines when you were there? Or
Yeah. Because like my mom, she's who I learned everything from. So like she is the one who is the chef in the family. And so when she was there, she visited this restaurant and bought one of these books. Hang on. Here it is. Right here.
Oh my goodness.
Right there. It says Manulit. That's my mom's maiden name. So that is this person's grandmother.
Wow.
And she is maybe like in her 90s. So she's old. And it goes really, really far back.
Wow. That is amazing. And so are we going to be able to put this in our audiography? Are people going to be able to go check that out? Or do you have to go to the restaurant in the Philippines to get it?
I actually don't know.
All right. Well,
let me look that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Tell us the name again, though.
Aching Lillian's Heirloom Recipes, Romancing the Past Through Traditional Kalutong Kapampangan. Just Kapampangan cooking.
And what is Kapampangan?
Kapampangan. So my parents are from Pampanga. And if you are from Pampanga, you are a Kapampangan.
Ah, okay, cool. That is amazing.
Like an American.
And and so, what are special? So is there anything that you can go? Oh, and what's special about these dishes is what's the base of them? What's unique to them?
So, everyone in the Philippines thinks that they're the culinary capital, but the real truth is that Pampanga is the culinary capital of the Philippines. And if we have any Filipino listeners, which I know we do because I look at our stats and I know our geography, don't fight me on this. I would say that, like, I don't even know how to describe it. I just think it's really, really good. And everyone does it differently, even house to house. So there's no one traditional Kapampangan cooking, but that's what I was raised on. That's what I gravitate towards.
That's so cool. That's so great. What a cool thing. All right. Megan.
I'm getting paid to be a producer for the first time. That's a big success for me.
Woo.
Also, for any creative who's had to sit down and figure out what their rate is for something, shout out to all of us having to do that at some time or another, because that is a rough, emotional, mental, psychological experience. Trying to be like, what am I worth is a journey. I get to go home for Easter, and it will also be my cousin's baby's second birthday. And I am super excited about that because she is very cute and very smart. And I found out recently that when her mom goes into her room in the morning to be like, hi, sweetie, good morning. She tells her mom to sit down in the chair because she's not done being in bed yet. And I think that is the cutest thing. And I will also be telling anyone who tries to wake me up to sit down because I'm not done being in bed yet.
And you're doing a puppet Shakespeare show on Twitch?
I am. So my good friends over at Perception Studios, they've been doing a Shakespeare show called Bardic Inspiration. And they invited me to come in. And I was like, absolutely. There is nothing I love more than being ridiculous and doing Shakespeare at the same time. But if you do decide to watch, if you tip Perception Studios and all of the funds go to like keeping their Twitch channel alive, basically, you can suggest an accent or impression for one member or for the entire cast to do. I am awful at accents. So if you would like to mortify me live on Twitch, somebody come and suggest Scottish again, because last time we did that, it was not Scottish. I'll tell you that.
Serita.
My dog started what I've been calling reform school, aka private training sessions.
How's that going?
It's actually going very well. It's working. So that's very exciting. And the most interesting thing in my life.
Are you going to see the great solar eclipse of 2024?
I will, because it's going to pass like Austin. You're going to be able to see it in totality here in Austin. So that is very exciting. I'm looking forward to that.
I have to tell you, I went and saw the 2017 one, and I promised then to myself that I would go to the 2024, which at the time seemed forever. We weren't even sure we were going to still be alive, right? I mean, it was like, well, if I'm alive, if we're still in the United States, I'm going.
Fair. No, Austin. I've got a guest room.
Okay.
Ooh, there you go.
I might take you up on that.
Please do.
Because it is one of the best experiences of my life, experiencing the one in 2017, the total solar eclipse. The totality means a lot. And it's going to be longer. It's like twice as long.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a long one.
All right. We're here to talk about moonlighting. We gave you all an assignment to watch some moonlighting episodes and some clips. Did you have a chance to do that?
I watched episodes. I managed to forget about the clips. And you were like, they're only like 15 minutes. And yeah, the way this brain is set up. But I did watch the episodes.
Okay, cool. All right.
Did you watch the bonus episode as well, or just the for the extra credit, or
just the assigned?
Just the assigned.
I didn't. Okay. Yeah, I didn't do the extra credit, which is actually very unlike me.
Well, you just went through Super Tuesday, so
Yeah.
I'm going to get it.
Thank you.
Megan, Sergio, were you guys able to complete the Moonlighting watching assignment?
Yes.
Yes, and I watched an extra episode.
Thank God you did.
Excellent.
Okay.
I did not watch the extra episode that you gave us.
Oh, no, I mean even beyond that.
Oh.
I went and found
wow,
an extra
okay.
episode and watched it.
Okay.
What was
Ooh,
it
this
that
is gonna
made
be
you? Was there
interesting.
a specific episode you went to find?
This is so embarrassing. I just wanted to watch them get together. So I looked up what episode they get together for the first time, and I watched that one.
No, listen, no shade. That's kind of what the show's about. You know.
Oh,
so-
absolutely.
The assignment was to watch season 1, episode 1, the pilot.
And then season 2, episode 3, entitled "Money Talks, Maddie Walks."
And then season 2, episode 4, the dream sequence always rings twice.
And season 2, episode 18, called "Camille."
The bonus episode that it sounds like Megan watched was from season 3, episode 6, Big Man on Mulberry Street.
One of my favorites.
The musical theater episode.
Yes.
And then we actually sent a little collection of YouTube scenes and snippets. Sort of takes about 15 minutes to watch them, maybe less. That were just some unique moments from the show that I thought would give us a little more flavor for our 90s TV babies. So, before we get too far into it, what did you know of this show before we started, if anything? And Sergio, you get to answer from before we started working ostensibly on Moonlighting.
Before we started working on it, I knew nothing about Moonlighting. I do remember when it came to streaming and everybody was like, oh my gosh, Moonlighting's streaming now. That's so crazy. And I just, it didn't really mean much to me because I didn't know anything about it. Like at all.
Megan, what about you?
Same. Absolutely nothing. Had never heard the title. Not a single thing.
See, and this is why we're talking to you guys about this show. This is fascinating. This is very interesting.
Serita.
I had heard of it and I thought it was a movie. I had heard of it, and as soon as I saw Cybill Shepherd and Bruce Willis, I was like, oh, right. Okay, I know that this is a thing that exists, but I had never watched it.
Okay. All right. And so outside of Moonlighting, did you know of Bruce Willis and or Cybill Shepherd, and from where?
Yes. Yeah. I've seen them. I mean, a lot of stuff.
I knew of Bruce Willis, not Cybill Shepherd. And my first encounter, I think, with Bruce Willis was Bandits, the movie, which is still one of my favorite films.
I don't think I know this movie.
That's a deep cut.
Okay.
You should watch Bandits.
Okay.
If you like Bruce Willis,
I do.
Billy Bob Thornton and Cate Blanchett all being ridiculous together.
Wow.
You should watch Bandits.
Okay.
2001.
How did I miss that? Anyway.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So that was your introduction to Bruce Willis. All right. Sergio.
I knew of Bruce Willis. I don't know. I'd never seen anything with him in it. So this was all new to me. Yeah. Or Cybill Shepherd.
That's fair enough. So here's the thing. It's one of those shows, not unlike Remington Steele, where the person that was the star of the show that got the show, we're making this show, was Cybill Shepherd. Because she was the movie star.
Okay, right. That's what I
was sort of making her comeback.
Yeah.
And like a huge movie star from a very young age.
Right.
And Bruce Willis was unknown. Like the network did not want to cast him.
I didn't know he was unknown.
Oh, yeah.
I thought he was just new.
He was known in New York.
I don't know that he'd even done anything on film at that point. He was doing theater in New York. He was working as a bartender, as Cheryl told us, because she knew him from New York.
And he was in a band.
Yeah.
Bruno and the something.
And that's way he would have ruined my life in my early 20s.
Oh, for sure.
Just would have let him wreck my credit.
He was more unknown than Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah.
Because Pierce Brosnan had done a couple of things and had done, some things.
That's so wild because the show in so many ways just feels like, here's everything Bruce Willis can do.
Yes.
Like it showcases
Cybill feels like a side character.
Yeah. Like it showcases everything he does well. He gets honestly, it's an enviable role. He gets like the vulnerability that like Bruce Willis does actually very well. He gets the like kind of like snarky sexiness. He gets to be a badass, and he gets to be like that weird but also actually legitimately very sexy thing that Bruce Willis does, where you're just like, you would have wrecked my early 20s. Damn it.
You would have ruined my life.
Okay. High level first thoughts on the show.
I loved it. I loved the sense of humor. And I normally am not like a pun person either, but it's more than that. It's not just like dumb dad jokes. It's like very witty and quick, and I loved that. But it doesn't take itself too seriously, which I also loved. I love a detective show, but like you watch 4 episodes of Law and Order back to back and you're like, I think I'm depressed. Like, I think this has gone a little too deep now. Whereas this was just fun. And that was so refreshing. I liked its and loved the examples, especially that you sent of it breaking the fourth wall in such an extreme way. I loved its commitment to that. I loved that it was like, there's no rules around this. Sometimes we'll say Bruce Willis, sometimes we'll say David. Who knows? I really loved that though. It never felt pretentious. I think it always felt very genuine. And that's something I really liked about it.
Excellent.
Sergio?
If you know me, you know I really adore things that are unconventional, witty, clever, and like just things that you've never seen before. And even though this came out in the 80s, I was just like, wow, they are doing things that people even today aren't doing. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. What I loved most about it is that as I was watching, I just never knew what to expect. I never knew where they were going to go. So like, not to jump too far ahead, but like the season 2 finale, I just kept watching the clock and I saw I had 15 minutes left and I was just like, oh my God, how are they going to resolve this? This is going to be crazy. What's going to happen? And then they just did what they did. And I was just so baffled by it, but it was so funny and so good.
It's so good.
I was amazed. Honestly, I was amazed. And I loved the examples that you sent. I thought the Shakespeare clip was really funny. And like just Cybill Shepherd and Bruce Willis are a just absolutely brilliant pair. They were just so like, I don't know how to even describe it. Like, you know, when they're just two performers who are just so in tune with each other, and like their characters that they can just rattle off like nothing. It was so impressive to watch.
Yeah, you've kind of left both of us a little speechless here. That's and because I think we both agree to a large extent of everything you've talked about. And honestly, I remembered the show. I remembered how much fun it was, but I'd forgotten a lot of the specifics, and it was eye-opening to go back and start watching some of these episodes. And as you said, Sergio, basically that they're doing things on this show that nobody has done since, really. People have tried. They've tried to kind of capture that spirit a little bit, but not taken it to the limits that this show did at its height. And yeah, it's creatively, it's just absolutely brilliant.
That is so, it's so great that translates, because it's hard to know. And Serita, high level first thoughts on the show.
Okay, I didn't love it. It was a little, and I wanted to because I liked the setup. We love a reverse rags to riches. The fun fact, the entire music video of "You Better Have My Money" by Rihanna is all about her business manager who ran off with a bunch of her money, and that's what she wrote that song about. And like, in the video, she kidnaps the business manager's wife, and and it's like, and hijinks. I had no idea. I mean, I'm aware of the song, but I honestly have not clearly not listened to it carefully. So I have to go find that video. It's about her old business manager trying to steal a bunch of her money, which is why never be too big to sign your own checks. But yeah, like, that I love Schitt's Creek. Like I love a reverse rags to riches premise, right? But it was just so slow. And I can acknowledge this might be the ADHD talking of just like, ooh, this is like, and there were moments where I was like, that's funny. This is interesting. Like, it wasn't a bad show by any means. It's just the pacing of it was too slow for me to really be like, I want to keep watching this.
Okay. Very exciting.
It's always coming in with a controversial take.
Welcome to my world, Serita. I'm usually the person sitting in the corner while everybody else is on one side of the issue. And I'm over here by myself with my popcorn going, nope, you guys are all wrong. So totally, I totally get it.
A caucus of one in the corner.
Pretty much.
Yes.
And I'm right.
Well, I didn't want to say it.
And so when you went on, Megan, you went on to watch them get together.
I did. Yeah. And to be fair, I do want to keep watching it. I do really enjoy it and want to go back to, we watched the pilot, but I want to go back to season 1 and like watch it straight through. I just want to keep watching it. But yeah, I specifically wanted to watch them get together. I needed the like conclusion of that, or at least the semi-conclusion of that, to feel satisfied before I walked away. And that actually, once we get into later conversations, I actually kind of regret watching it before this in some ways, though, because that is a very revealing episode about a couple of different things, like in the conversation around feminism.
So, is it feminist?
Okay. Here's where I get stuck on this. The show is not about her. The show is about their relationship. And so it's hard to pick it apart in that way and be like, is it upholding her in a feminist light when it's like she's so tied to him purposefully because it's about their relationship? Similarly, I don't think we can call something feminist just because the men are idiots in it, which this show is really great at doing. Like, the men are just idiots. It's kind of fun, but it doesn't inherently make it feminist. I kind of land on it is, because she is empowered. She is smart and capable. There are representations of other types of women on the show. Again, as I think we always say, it is certainly not intersectional, but for the white women on the show, there seems to be a broad representation of the type of women that are presented, what they want to do with their life, what their goals are, how much power or lack thereof they have in situations. There seems to be like a widespread. And so I'd say yes, but it's hard to say yes when the show itself is contingent upon this woman's relationship to this man. If you take him out of it, the show is not as interesting and doesn't really exist. So, yeah. My answer is yeah.
Sounds like it's more almost a kind of sometimes.
Yeah.
But leaning more towards trying to get there, perhaps.
Yeah. It kind of, as I was thinking about that, I thought a lot of the Mindy Project. Where it's like, I would definitely say the Mindy Project is a feminist show, but the entire show is about her relationship to various men. And it's meant to be that. I don't think it is problematic to tell those stories. It just all of a sudden becomes well, if it's not about uplifting just the woman herself, and Mindy Project, because she's, it's about her relationships with multiple people, although overall Danny, it ends up being a little less this, but Moonlighting, it's really about their relationship. So it's hard.
Yeah.
Well, especially since we've watched, I think Susan and I have watched more episodes than you have, but as you go forward, there become more and more episodes that are about, not necessarily about a case. It's more about whatever's going on in their lives, like Mulberry Street is basically. So it really, in a lot of ways, it does become kind of a relationship show.
Yeah.
I think she definitely held her own and wasn't just yeah, you can talk to me any kind of way, but to even still just be lobbing those things at her, whether she can take it or not, is just bonkers to me. Because even in the premise of the show, right? She's his boss. She owns the business.
Sergio, is it feminist? Is it progressive?
I think of all the things that you've had us watch so far up to this point, this one has felt the most ambitious in the conversations it wants to take on, and the way that it presents these things. Is it feminist? I think I sort of fall into the same category as Megan, where I'm yeah, it's feminish. It's feminish.
Feminish.
Yeah. Where I can see feminist characters, but an overarching concept and what it is trying to accomplish might not be. But yeah, I think I'm gonna stay with feminish because that just seems like the buzzword, And that's the soundbite.
All right, and is it progressive?
It's not intersectional. No. I struggle with if it's progressive or not. I don't think so. By the standards of today, I don't think so. Doesn't mean I can't still enjoy it.
Okay, this is probably a good time to take a break. We'll be back. And we're back. So the dream sequence always rings twice, which is the black and white episode that has the introduction by Orson Welles. Do you have any knowledge of who Orson Welles was? Megan?
Yes.
Sergio?
Yes.
Serita?
Yes, I do. Because one, when my mom was a baby in Spain, Orson Welles said that baby is unhappy because she was crying, and he held her and made her stop crying.
What? Wait.
They were at a cafe.
Yeah, start at the beginning, leave nothing out.
I did not set that story up well at all. So my mom is a citizen born abroad. She was born in Seville, in Sevilla, Spain. My grandfather was in the Air Force, so that's where he was stationed at the time. And my mom was a baby, so my aunt was maybe 3.5, 4. So my grandma is by herself at a cafe with a toddler and a baby who is very fussy. And Orson Welles happened to be a table or two over, and basically half joking, half not joking, was kind of does someone want to shut that baby up? And was let me see the baby. And bounced my mom a couple times, and she settled down.
I'm speechless.
Also, Orson Welles is not who I would expect to settle a baby.
Not at all.
Further disturb a baby? Maybe.
Sure.
But not settle one down.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, my grandma, she knew that he was somebody. And his demeanor and the people around him, right? She knew he was somebody, didn't fully know who he was.
Is this a story that your grandmother would tell people? Is that how you know it? Or how did this get passed
how did
down?
I come about this? It is a story that my grandma tells about her time in Sevilla. But what's funny is it is not the story that she leads with, nor is it the story that she ends with. It is a middle story for her.
Orson Welles and a baby in Spain. It'll turn into the story where Orson Welles stole your mother and ran off.
And he kidnapped her.
Oh, God.
Took her to the bullfights.
Yeah.
With Hemingway. Weren't they? Hemingway was around. Hemingway was probably next to him and said, Orson, do something about that baby.
Right. Talking about like, oh, there were people around him. And my grandma was just like, I don't know. Your mom was being very fussy all day. And you're like, the way that like the story, like the interesting part of the story to them is that a stranger was able to calm my mom down and not like who the stranger was and like the context of everything. Like my grandma tells it as such a like tired mom story.
All right. That's fair. You know what?
Yeah.
I'd let anybody hold a baby if it was calming it down.
That was basically what she was like. She was like, your aunt was like fidgeting everywhere because she's 4 and your mom is crying and I'm just trying to eat lunch. So yeah, if somebody wants to hold the baby, go for it.
But doesn't it go really one of two ways when you have an infant and you hand off to a stranger? They either cry louder or they're so startled, they're like, oh, and then they stop. So,
right. It was a risky move because it could have gone the other way. And my mom could have just really doubled down and been like, get me out of here. But she was so startled that she settled down.
And what's your mom's name?
Stephanie.
All I'm picturing is Orson Welles going, hello, Stephanie. You should stop crying.
I'm sure it was so jarring to a baby. God?
Oh,
small
God.
child. Do you know I directed Citizen Kane? Do what I tell you.
May we, if any of us get famous, may we all not be too famous to hold
Don't be
a baby.
too famous to hold a baby.
Words to live by.
That is the number one lesson. Oh my gosh.
Never be too big to not sign your own check and never be too famous to not hold a baby.
That's right.
It's so true. All right. So Sergio, did you know who Orson Welles was?
Yes. I didn't realize that he directed, produced, and starred in Citizen Kane, which I have seen.
So it had a whole other layer of him introducing that episode.
Right. I mean, I was thinking about this while I was watching it, where I was like, because they mentioned the 40s in that episode, because it's obviously like based off of like noir films and all that, and like draws upon a lot of those tropes. I was like, wait a minute. The 40s for the 80s are what the 80s are for us, like today, right now.
Yes.
And that was crazy to me, just putting that into perspective, because I was like, oh, so like just culturally thinking about how much from the 80s that we still draw upon, it's definitely the same, and it feels the same for folks in the 80s to do that for the 40s. So that's just where my mind went.
Yeah. And it's kind of, that's a crazy thing to think about, because it's also for people who grew up in the 80s, the idea, you're like, you technically know it's been 40 years. But then when you say something like that, you're like, oh, that's how different the world is.
Yeah.
For them to be like, not only is this going to be in the 40s, but we need Orson Welles to tell you it's going to be in the 40s and that it's going to be in black and white. And that's different than what you are used to. Don't be alarmed. Don't be jarred. In the same way that I can think of other shows having to do a big setup for a flashback or for a time jump or something just to go back to the 80s and now like the 90s, or as the kids like to call it, the 1900s, which is so disrespectful.
Even so, there is a big difference culturally in the difference of the 40 years between the 40s to the 80s than from the 80s to now. The differences in the number of changes that the world went through in that first 40-year period from 40s to 80s, to me, is very different from the last 40 years. At least that's the way it feels to me. Susan, I don't know if that feels that way to you.
Do you feel like it's more or less?
Oh, less.
You think the changes are less?
Well, I'm not saying that I'm saying culturally, that the changes are less. I mean, still have been a lot of changes, but if you think about who people were in the 40s to who people were between the 40s and the 80s and how much changed and the way things changed as compared to the 80s to now. Yes, there a lot of the the cultural baselines have not changed as significantly in the 80s to now as they have from the 40s to the 80s, where you went through the civil rights movement, where you went through the women's movement, where the pill came along, where the Vietnam War came along and the whole anti-war thing happened. We had a president assassinated. We had and another president shot at.
Yeah. I agree with you that there is, there were so many movements that happened in that time period. And you're right. Yes, there was an attempted assassination. There was an assassination of a president. And then there was an assassination of a presidential candidate. And public figures in a way that thankfully we don't have as much. But yet so many nuances have changed in this last 40 years.
Oh, sure.
That is also very different. I think the speed is increasing.
That's the biggest difference. The speed of the change in that 40s to the 80s is like a bicycle as compared to the rocket ship that's been the 80s to now, because of technology, because of social media, because of the internet. But there's also this sort of compactness. For instance, there seem to be young folks today in their 20s and 30s that are much more familiar with music, movies, television shows of the 80s than we were of what was going on in culture in the 40s. There seems to be a marked difference there, and the fact that we may have known about it, but we're like, yeah, that has nothing to do with me now. Whereas now, songs, movies, television shows seem to last, or the ones that hold on seem to last a little bit longer than they do now. Maybe because there's not as much of a difference in let's take music and the kind of music people were listening to in the 80s as there is now. There's a certain amount of similarity that there wasn't between 1940 and 1980. Music changed significantly.
And just access to information.
Yes.
What's interesting is, I saw Citizen Kane in my senior year of high school. When my high school English teacher drove me to downtown Los Angeles to see it at an art house.
Wow.
Because I asked him, because my mom wouldn't let me go to downtown Los Angeles alone. And none of my friends would go because I didn't know how to explain it to them. And they heard it was black and white. Thankfully, my English teacher, Mr. Ellis Lloyd, was amazing and a very special teacher for many people, including me. And so he gave me some context for that movie, both before and after I saw it, that helped me place it in film history at a time that I was interested in film but didn't understand how to study it, right? Like, you wouldn't have taken a film class in high school in the 80s. But it's interesting to think about just how different those decades are and then how the same, right? That we're still dealing with a lot of the same, as we've discovered in the show, we're still dealing weirdly with a lot of the same problems and questions and issues. Some of them we're dealing with that we thought we had kind of put away and we're done dealing with. And to really, that insight of the 40s are to the 80s, what the 80s are to now is just so kind of crazy to think about.
Mind-boggling, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, it's just really spot on.
You probably had to pull up stuff on this show before you sat down and watched any of it.
Definitely. Just because we've been.
Yeah.
For those of you who are listening who don't know, I am an 80s TV Ladies super fan, and I listen to every episode before they come out.
Sergio,
I just have such a vast knowledge.
Yes, works for 134 West and 80s TV Ladies, and helps manage our social media presence and
magnificently.
Thank you.
So I'm also often throwing things at him and going, "Just trust me, it was hot in the 80s,"
and it was.
But you do a very good job, given that it's not your natural habitat.
I'm starting to feel like it is.
That's
I'm amphibious.
Win you over.
Yeah. I live on land and in water.
In the now and the 80s, as all good folks should do.
Another thing, I absolutely love the way it portrays Los Angeles. In the pilot, I know that was directed by Robert Butler, who is like a television god. I just think it's really funny because I'm like, okay, when he said that he was going to rip off Remington Steele, he was like, let's do it. Weston Bonaventure, diamonds, German, well, let's go. We're going in. And then he did it. And I was like, okay, this all seems so familiar to me. I did love that. I love the physical comedy was something that was just so impressive. The timing of everything, the basketball going into the trash bin, then falling on Elise Beasley's head, and then the ball hitting, and then her just standing still. Like, that is absolutely peak comedy. I think that is like it. And the thing is, it looks so funny, but people don't realize how hard it is to pull off. You have to be super skilled, like immensely skilled, to just get the timing of all that correct. And I absolutely was so just charmed by it. Also, Cybill Shepherd is a force. When she comes out in the pilot episode, all of her outfits are amazing, by the way.
Yes.
The timing of the season 2 finale, where, like I said previously, where I was like, oh my God, how are they going to wrap it up? And then they literally wrap it up. They're like, okay, let's go. Cut. Everyone's gone. Lights off. We're leaving. That was great, you guys. I bet you Glenn Gordon Caron was up until 3 a.m. going, God, what am I going to do with Whoopi Goldberg and Judd Nelson in a way that is satisfying? And then he was just like, screw it. we're gonna do it again. We're breaking the fourth wall, folks. And I thought that was really funny. Of all the things we've watched, this is the most in tune with my humor, I think. Yeah. Even when they're doing the film noir episode, what is it? The dream sequence.
Yes, always rings twice.
Always rings twice. At first I was watching and I'm listening, and the things that Bruce Willis is saying are finally processing, where he's like, yeah, I play my trumpet out on the balcony under a flashing neon light because it makes me look cool. And I'm like, yeah, that is what they do in those kinds of movies. Isn't it? And I don't know. It was also really cool because there's just such a reverence for that genre in the way that it was presented.
Yeah. Such a reverence and such a joke. Again, the two things that I would, because I also think of Community, and then maybe The Simpsons, as something that is both referential and nodding and homaging to a lot of things, but also sending them up. Okay, so last thoughts, Serita.
Okay, the aesthetic of this show was simply to die for. Because it's and this is something that I've actually been reading a lot about recently, of particularly from 80s and 90s comedies, these style, basically uniforms that a lot of designers were doing for their character. Like the one that I was looking at recently was Regine from Living Single, and then they modeled Fran Drescher off of Regine. They actually they do a lot of side by side of them in the same outfit or the same pieces, but tweaked a little bit for their specific character. But they each have this style uniform of how their outfits are put together, and Moonlighting follows that a lot with Cybill. And it's all for her, it's very 80s of kind of the not super exaggerated shoulder pads, but a little bit of a shoulder pad with the triangle top and the straight pencil bottom, but in these gorgeous satins, and then the big lapels, and then that matches the muted jewel tone office, and then that's got a gorgeous clutch and a shoe to go with. Her style uniform is just chef's kiss. Last thoughts, like you said, I definitely modern for its time, in that you have a woman as part of the lead of the show, right? Like, and she is running things in a lot of ways. I don't know that I'll keep up with it. But maybe, I mean, you guys have really sold me on the Shakespeare episode that I feel like I need to check out again as a true theater major. And I just am so fascinated by the fact that Bruce Willis was essentially a nobody coming onto this show. And like, what a wild choice.
He had 11 auditions with the studio before they would let them hire him. And they kept telling the producer, the creator, no. And he kept saying, this is the guy, and kept bringing him back in and wore him down until they finally said
you
yes.
You trust your gut. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yes. And so there weren't any female directors, but this show actually had a number of assistant directors who went on to, either be directors or continue in entertainment. And so there were a lot of women kind of behind the scenes. They weren't necessarily in the bigger roles, but they were given the beginning of their career off of Moonlighting. So
that's rad.
Yeah. I think there was an intention. We spoke with Cheryl Main, who in one of our episodes, who's amazing, and you should listen to that episode because she's now a unit publicist on huge movies.
And she started in post-production.
On Moonlighting. And started as an assistant.
Yeah.
And by the end of the show was post-production supervisor.
Amazing.
Now that is very feminist.
Yes. And then when the show ended, Glenn actually took her and a number of people with him to basically he had a deal at that point, and they stayed with him until basically the deal ended. And then she stayed at Warner Brothers and became a publicist. So she's like credits Glenn and Bruce Willis with her career.
And the cool part is the follow through, right? We're going to keep giving them more and more opportunities and putting them in spaces they should be. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's something that is still not common now, right? It's always interesting to think about, like, what are the trade-offs of, all right, well, maybe her character on screen wasn't as feminist as she could be, but in some ways they were really walking the walk of what does it look like to center a woman, to center women, to center the success of women in production as well.
I have done a great disservice by not saying how absolutely obsessed I was with Miss DePesto. Like, love her. Absolutely love her. Again, the episode that was not required watching, but her and Cybill Shepherd at the bar, and she just pounds the drink and then is yelling at the bartender. Lives in my heart. It lives in such a large place in my heart. I was so happy.
And I had forgotten how great their relationship is over the course of the show. And they become closer friends over the course of the show and are sort of constantly kind of checking in with each other. Cybill will check in on Miss DePesto. Maddie will check in on Miss DePesto, and Miss DePesto will check in on Maddie and be like, "Are you okay? You seem like you're having a bad day." And then they have a conversation. Usually it's about the men in their lives. So I'm not sure where it is on the Bechdel scale, but it is a nice element that is not often an element of 80s television, unless it's an all-female show. So,
Glenn Caron said, I have to keep giving him credit because he deserves it. He knew Cybill Shepherd was perfect as Maddie, and he knew, despite all the pushback that he got from the network, that Bruce Willis was exactly who he needed to play David Addison. And you take either of them out and there is no show, and we're not here talking about them.
Right.
It's true. It's true. When you think about the other people they talk about potentially casting, you're like, okay, that would never have worked.
They might have been fine.
Yeah, it would have been fine. Yeah.
But they weren't going to take it to that level. They just weren't the right person.
And I think, again, they were both seemed so game. Mm-hmm. Even if behind the scenes they weren't. Once they were on screen, they were pretty magical. I also am going to give props to Elise Beasley. And in the season 3, you guys didn't really see any Curtis Armstrong.
Right.
But when
that's Bert, right?
That's
Yes.
Bert.
Yes.
When they came in to kind of fill in the gaps, very clearly. I mean, Elise was there the whole time, which actually made me think while we were listening to this, I'm like, oh, it started off being, she was the third lead. So it was 2 women and 1 man.
Right.
At the beginning of the show were the leads of the show. Even the Curtis Armstrong, Elise Beasley episodes, they actually hold up really well too. You know, they're not quite, they're very different. So they're not trying to do them, but they're pretty compelling. And I truly actually believe that they potentially could have done a spinoff with just them. But I don't know if that was ever taken seriously.
Well, that's a good question. Yeah. That could have been great.
Yeah.
I think that their characters were such that could have been something really great. If somebody just asked me,
yes,
you know,
once again,
I could have explained to them just how
Sharon should be running a network. You and Stan Zimmerman should be running a network.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
That would be good. That'd be a good network. I'd watch that. So are you going to watch more Moonlighting?
I definitely want to watch more. I intentionally did not, I did that one episode and then I intentionally didn't do any more because that one colored my judgment so much that I was like, okay, wait, I need to stop.
So Sergio, would you watch more Moonlighting?
I think so, actually. Yeah. It's definitely something that I'd like to revisit.
excellent.
Because I feel like I just got a little taste.
Yeah.
Especially for network television in the mid to late 1980s. Really? That they were able to pull this off and become beloved and become, you know, as big a hit as it was. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It's so culturally, you know, it was the Friends of its day, right? It was the, you know, it was definitely something that landed and exploded in the culture,
Right.
In a way that is hard to do now because people just aren't watching. You know, not everyone is watching the same thing.
Yeah.
And so very little surprises us too. Yeah, because we have so much to watch. But how about that Whoopi Goldberg and Judd Nelson?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Which is Camille. Season 2, episode 18.
I loved the Whoopi episode. One, loving Whoopi, but also it was a faster paced episode. Like, because they had the title cards, put in.
Devil in a Blue Dress.
They played that and the songs, and a young Judd Nelson, which, you know, Judd Nelson's sort of over by the time you guys came on board, but he's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I don't know who Judd Nelson is.
As I'm thinking about it, I didn't look up the dates.
Oh.
I'm going to guess this was.
Oh. Okay. But apart from that,
he was part of
that's why he looks so familiar.
Brat Pack. He was part of the Brat Pack.
Yeah, that's why he looks so familiar.
It came after Breakfast Club.
Really?
So he had become a star. He had done St. Elmo's Fire. He was a star.
No way.
Yes.
Really?
Way.
So it was like a big deal that they had him on the show.
Yeah. And Whoopi Goldberg had just done her first movie.
Oh, The Color Purple.
Oh, gosh. That was her first movie?
That was her first movie.
I've forgotten that too.
I assumed that this had to be after Breakfast Club because of literally the camera shots of Judd Nelson gave and here he is. You know, when they have the special celebrity guest star.
That makes sense. I just didn't think to look up the dates.
I'm very curious if there's going to be a new generation of people kind of find that show.
Yeah.
Well, help them out, Sergio. Tell all your friends to watch Moonlighting.
Of course. No, you know what? One last thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. When in the Shakespeare episode, Cybill Shepherd pulls the curtain and there's just vases and there's a label that says throwing vases. That is when I was like, there you go. There it is. No one's ever going to top that. That's just, they set the bar in the 1980s and it's yet to be cleared because throwing vases behind the oh my gosh, don't even get me started. I got started, but loved it.
I love that's one of my favorite moments too. That's one of my favorite scenes.
What a good gag
in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the clip and I was like, oh, I need to watch this one in its entirety. As a Shakespeare person, I was like, yes. It made me appreciate the writing a whole lot because I know that scene decently well between Kate and Petruchio. And so where they actually pulled the Shakespeare lines and where they were like, no, we're going to insert a joke here instead. Or where it felt, it was perfect. I rewound and watched that YouTube clip because I was like, that is just excellent. That is some Muppets level nonsense. And I want more.
Yeah, I think the show is at its best when it's at the Muppet level nonsense. It really does. And season 2 starts to really hone in on that in the beginning of season 3. And there's a lot of kind of this perfect balance.
It's one of the examples too, I think, that showcases both of them well. Because all of the like witty, zippy, quick stuff showcases Bruce Willis really well. But when they get into like physical humor or just being kind of wacky, they're actually both really good at it. So it elevates both of them, I think. Which, listen, to me, like one of the most stunning women that could be conceived, just being like, you know what, I'm down to be ridiculous and also deliver a one-liner and also be super powerful and then super vulnerable and sexy in this next thing. How much exponentially hotter you get, to me at least, with all of that is like, hot damn, okay.
That is so funny. Yeah. I'm so glad.
And then when he parks his horse.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Stolen directly from Mel Brooks.
Anyway, thank you, Sergio.
Thank you.
And thank you, Megan.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Serita.
Thank you.
And Serita, do you want to tell us about your podcast?
Sure. My podcast, Not Ugly Pod. We have 2 seasons up and we're actually insider tip, getting ready to come back for season 3. Which is very exciting. It's conversations with folks exploring how people think about beauty, how they thought about beauty throughout their lives, and how we can challenge the way we as a society think about beauty.
I really have enjoyed it. I've been listening to a couple episodes. I'm really enjoying it. So,
thank you.
I'm so proud of you. And all of you. It's always delightful.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you
guys.
so much.
Bye.
In today's audiography, there'll be a link in our description on where you can watch the YouTube playlist of fun scenes that we gave to the 90s TV babies.
And you can find more about Moonlighting and the team that got the Moonlighting DVD released at moonlighting21.com. The link will be in our description. They have a ton of great content and interviews and a Facebook page.
Be sure to check out Serita's Not Ugly Pod.
It's so much fun. It's also Women's History Month. Thank you, women, and all your history. But I just want to remind everyone that abortion access across the country is severely limited for millions of women. If you need an abortion or want to help people across the country access vital health care, please go to abortionfinder.org where you can donate and you can also find out information.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your feedback and comments. Did any of you guys out there recently watch or rewatch Moonlighting? And if so, what did you think?
We love hearing from you. Send us messages at our website, 80stvladies.com. That's 80stvladies.com.
We hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will lead us forward toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century.